there's a lot happening in the world today that is of all these happenings because it helps to keep you informed and to be able to connect the dots as well. Because connecting the dots help you see how things operate in the world and not be fooled or not be distracted.
Yeah, I've shared to a couple of platforms. One of the things that is very important, what we do, what you and I do, and we've been doing in the past is, you know, um, it is very important because when this revolution started, the mindset that our people had, they thought that the war is a fair place. We were so naive in the way that we were, assessing what was currently happening to us. A lot of people, we the mindset that we come from, we have been fooled to think that the war is a terrain of black and white. We thought if you went into our people's minds during at the onset of this revolution, or let's say, wait, people's mind. Let me see, maybe that echo is coming from.
I think it came from my end. Go ahead. Sorry, I fixed it.
Sorry. Our people thought that the war is, like a black and white, the way we've been programmed in Africa, the way we've been programmed as a people. We think that something that is so blatant, like the Ambazonian struggle, something that is so blatant that we are under oppression. The UN didn't fulfill its own commitment. Or people thought that when we go out and protest and take all the necessary documents to the UN to remind them, it will just be a slam dunk. They will just come in and say, okay, yeah, for real, we didn't, decolonize you people. We're going to have you guys have to decide whether you want to live by yourself. And then that's the mindset that 90% of our people started off with. In such a way that when we from the age of C said from the onset that this is going to be an armed struggle, a lot of people thought that we were crazy, they were scared. Because our people didn't understand the global dynamics. They didn't understand the world is run on a premise of interest. Why? Because we have a particular type of mindset. And what you and I do, to a certain extent, we sort of bring our people's minds, to the current situation, what is happening around the world, to have a better understanding of where we need to put effort and emphasis, how we need to fight, the amount of effort that we need to put in to liberate ourselves. Let's stop living in this, mindset of thinking that the world is a fair and a just place. Is a dog fight that we find ourselves in. By the way, to our viewers, I want to take this privilege to first of all introduce my most able and learned geopolitical analysts that we have in Ambazonia. One of the top ranking analysts that we have in Ambazonia, who looks at the world from multiple dimensions. I'm so privileged to share this platform with the chair of the National Economic Council of the AGOC. I really enjoy because you've taught me a lot. You've made me to see things from a different perspective. You've given me the assignment to always research on issues, topics. You point out some areas that I have to go look into. I mean, to keep ourselves current. What we do is to inform and educate our people so that we have the proper mindset and the appropriate and the proper determination to free our land. I'm so blessed and humbled to always share a platform with you. I want to thank you for always taking some time off in coming to sit with me, discuss on the geopolitical, events and the global happenings, to keep our people informed and to let them know what is happening globally, not to sit in our silos and think that things are going to change No, we need to understand the global dynamics to give us the right framework in approaching our liberation struggle. Thank you, comrade. You can, yeah. Just nothing before we go into our topics of discussion.
Thank you very much, Chief Logistics of the ADF, the Ambazonian Defense Forces. I couldn't be more honored to be on your platform. In fact, you bring out the best in not just me, but in the both of us when we get together and have conversations around this very poignant and educative topic, subject matter. So it is such a pleasure for me to be on this platform so we can continue to have these conversations and educate our people, provide context, bring things that are very far-fetched in the system, bring it all consolidated, consolidate this message and present to them in a concise format that makes sense so that they can be able to read in between the lines and make their own decisions. Thank you. It's an honor for me to be here.
Thanks very much, my old comrade. You know, this is series 3 because we have done some earlier series. So right. I want to start labeling this series. The series that we'll be doing so that people can always reference it as we go along. You can always reference it for historical purposes. You can always go back and make a reference to our topic of discussion and use it as some form of an archive so that subsequent future we can always go back there and see how we can adjust and amend certain things as we struggle to liberate our land. We can use some of the knowledge or the happenings and, you know, on our topics of discussion as reference points in addressing certain things as we move forward. So, comrade,
right.
I want to ask you something. A lot has been happening around the world, and I know you take your time out to do a lot of research and the ton of information, the amount of the change that we are experiencing in the world currently. It is happening so fast, like a lightning, that we have to keep, it's our role to keep our people fully informed on the globally, what is happening, what affects us as a people, as Ambazonia, as a people, as a race of people, and to see how the chips are moving across the board, because that's something that we need to really bring it raw to our people. We need to use our own mindset to bring things raw to our people to understand what is currently happening. But we'll touch on a couple of topics. Let's start off with Ambazonia. Then we move into the epicenter of the actual liberation of Africa. That's the AES nations, the Sahel. We'll touch on other aspects of events happening in Africa, South Africa and its relationship with the current struggle with the ICC in relation to Palestinian genocide. It's Israeli genocide on the Palestinian because it's been established, and South Africa is leading the charge. You know, we talked about it the last time and the recent happenings that occurred recently. We also touched on the Russia-Ukraine war and the effects of the Russia-Ukraine war on the global South. We'll touch on, those are the key things that we are going to go into discussion in this we're going to discuss in this panel. So let's start with Ambazonia. When you look at how the things are churning on in our territory, and when you look at, to fight a war, one of the biggest tools that is utilized in warfare is the war of the mind, psychological warfare. When you look at Ambazonia, you look at our enemy, like Cameroon. What can you say? Because the biggest tool now is not even a military approach. They are invested a lot into the psychological warfare. So recently in our own land, we've heard a lot of talks about, we are losing, oh, we are not fit to fight like what we Cameroon are. At the same time, they cannot defeat us in the battlefield. So when you look at that, what is the message that they are trying to push? What is our enemy trying to do using collaborators amongst us in trying to, undercut us, undermine us? What do you think about that from a psychological perspective? What is their goal? Where are they trying to, what point are they trying to score in relation to that?
Right. Right. Comrade, you couldn't have been more right when you started this conversation by talking about the fact of potential morality, justice, fairness in the international arena when it comes to politics and events that are happening in various countries. You couldn't have been more right. There is no benevolence in that. Countries always generally seek for their own individual interest. It is very apparent with what is currently happening, which is, if you look at the United Nations today, what is happening in Palestine, where there is an active genocide happening right in our faces, on our phones, on our tablets, on our computers. Every day you turn them on, the TVs, you see how these things are happening. Yet international law seems to fall short. You would think that in such a dire situation, the rules-based order, so-called rules-based order, will prevail, but that hasn't really happened. Now, coming to the Ambazonia situation, Ambazonians would have noticed a concerted effort that is currently going on, mostly propaganda, the use of us in trying to kill us as well. Mostly propaganda in terms of the fact that let's break this down so that way you can fully understand what Chief Logistics and myself are trying to put forward here. About 3 weeks ago, or close to a month ago, there was a high-level official visit by the U.S. Undersecretary to the La République du Cameroon's government. At the same time, on a Monday, which is a ghost town day, there was another visit by the French ambassador to Ambazonia, limiting his visit to upstation Bamenda. So those two events, even though it may seem it may seem apart, they are somewhat connected. Somewhat connected that these two superpowers are in conflict with interest in various specific regions and subspecific areas within Africa. If you take the visit of the Undersecretary of the US to La République, they have been pushing time immemorial to try to look for a way to establish a military base in La République du Cameroon. La République du Cameroon has pushed back because obviously they understand that that is the basis for a lot of coup d'etats that have happened. And even when that is not the basis of coup d'etats, when the military establishes it, when a foreign military establishes its base in your country, it tends to push for events that should happen within your government. So you lose basically powers to operate. And if you do not do the things that they ask you to do, then at some point you find yourself no longer being in government. So that is one of the situations happening there. They've been that pushback. Now there is also the French, who have thought that in order for them to manage the transition that is going to happen in Cameroon and maintain their interest in La République du Cameroon, they have to find a way that they would have conversations between La République du Cameroon personnel and people, mostly people that they regard as elites in Ambazonia, have that conversation to find some middle ground and then push an agenda which is being done through all of these satellite individuals, these black legs calling themselves that they are true Ambazonians, spending the entire day talking about the Ambazonian Governing Council and its leadership instead of focusing on fighting a war. Now, with those two events going on, one person is looking for a bigger picture, strategic, the United States looking to establish its military presence within La République du Cameroon and even Nigeria and some other countries so that way they can have an influence in the Gulf of Guinea. If you imagine from all the way from Angola coming through the Gulf of Guinea proper and Nigeria and going through Senegal. There is a huge deposit of natural resources all over there. So the fear is that whoever controls those resources, therefore, will maintain economic power as well. It's all about influence, power, both financially and military power. On the other hand, you have the French that are losing track substantially within within Africa, that are now finding a way that they can maintain their hegemony or their control over La République, including the Ambazonian territory. So that was what was happening. So don't worry about all of these people that go out there and try to kind of preach to you, talking about a losing war. Now that said, let me say why they are all why all of it is propaganda. If you look at the economy of La République du Cameroon, and in this case, we can even include what they've done to Ambazonia. What has happened over several years since, like, saying their independence in 1960, has been an economy that has not established any production manufacturing capacity. So essentially, they've been borrowing to pay civil servants, borrowing to basically pay salaries. When you do that, you do not create a means in which you pay back those loans. So you end up having to rely on extracting your resources and paying for all of that debt. So at the end of the day, you're basically just selling yourself, selling your resources on an ongoing basis to pay for the debt that you're collecting. Now, what Ambazonia has done has has frozen the extraction of a lot of the resources that were coming from the Ambazonian territory. In this case, Sonara is running now at far below capacity, and most of the other industry, the deforestation that was happening in Ambazonian territory is no longer happening, so they can't even afford to pay their debt. Evidence of that is what you see in big cities, in large cities of La République like Douala and Yaoundé. If you thought that they had the money, why are they not collecting the trash that are on the roads? Why are they not repairing their roads? Why are they not paying their civil servants, their teachers, and all of that? The truth of the matter is that they cannot afford it. And the one thing that has happened with Ambazonia too is that we are running a war of attrition. What that means is that we are slowly taking. If you fight a war where you do not go directly with a conventional army and then get with limited resources and then get trashed out, then basically defeated and the war is over. Basically, you're taking them slowly. So slowly, we've been extracting those resources from them, resources in terms of material, war materials, resources in terms of the firepower, and they're running out. Another thing that has happened, I mean, we're saying all of this so that La République du Cameroon government know that we know, so we know exactly what we're doing. And in which regards, the Ambazonian Governing Council is not going to function on any individual's agenda. We are not taking bait to go out there to do anything because some individual asked us to do so. So you can keep your bait to yourself.
Yes.
Now, as I was saying regarding that, they should know that we know what is going on, is that right now there is limited material that is out there that can be supplied to countries to use to fight wars, especially that is coming from the West. I'm not including the East, like China and the rest that still have a huge base of supplies, but are not going to give it because China tends to not want to find itself in the internal affairs of any country. So it would generally not supply weapons to La République du Cameroon in situations like this. So with the limitations of those weapons that are coming from the West, especially from the Czech Republic, where La République got a huge, almost 80% of supplies of its guns and weapons to fight Ambazonia previously, that are now being channeled to other places like Ukraine. In the absence of that, we know that La République too is short. They are short, and so they now move towards a propaganda regime to think that they can use that to win the war. Let La République know that the Ambazonian Governing Council is currently still have not deployed its liberation tax yet. That is still coming. There are plans on the way, a strategy being put in place in order to at the right time to deploy those assets. So that said, all of the propaganda that you're doing, you can keep doing them. They do not impact anything. The Ambazonian Governing Council is not going to react based on some individual's propaganda. Now, we've known that people like Agobala, people that have been paid by whether it is by the French or the Prime Minister's Office of La République du Cameroon, they are not going to run the agenda or the strategy of the Ambazonian Governing Council. The Ambazonian Governing Council is going to continue to deploy its strategy the way it sees fit in the context of the macro level of activities that are happening in the world and the context of what its strategy calls for to win the war. The ultimate objective will be the independence of Ambazonia. You can delay it, but it is still going to, at some point, come to its designated a goal or objective in this case. So, comrade, I thought that I positioned this at the beginning of this conversation, so we know exactly.
You could have said it. You could have said it better. I picked out a lot of critical things that you said, a lot, and I will try to highlight in my own way so that we try to bring things into context to our audience and our Ambazonians. One of the things you said that caught my attention, there was a concerted effort to disempower all Francophone countries economically to continue that dependency on the French, even to the level of paying their people. Because if you got the internal economic empowerment, you will not need them for anything. That was strategically done by the French. You raised a point, a very critical point. They did everything possible, even you and I, the people who left the diaspora wanting to invest in back home, but they discouraged them and destroyed any effort that we made in empowering and strengthening our economy internally. That was coming from l'Élysée from France. That was been their policy. You don't have the tool, they have to economically weaken you, so you are never strong. And we are going to move into the AES, the epicenter of African liberation. We'll go there and know. Man, you touched on some very key points. That's something that I never ever processed, that it was actually a strategy that was really implemented to make sure that you cannot, because if let's say all these Francophone countries were doing for themselves, they will not need France. But France made sure that nothing, you will not be economically independent. That was a policy. I think it was from the onset. And that's why you see those countries struggling, because you made this point out that when you look at, you dissect like Cameroon, and you look at it, you say, even all the critical assets were run by France.
Exactly, and you're making a very good point. There is a statement that was made by the current Malian prime minister, that there were times when guys will be sharing weapons between themselves, one weapon for 8 individuals, and then the terrorists will come and attack them. We know that, let La République know that we think about all these things. We know that there are 4 armored vehicles, 4 of them, including a 4x4s that travels like from my 16 all the way to Boya. So what they do is they constantly move so that to give the semblance of being more than 4, there is multiple of them. So they constantly keep moving back and forth to give the semblance of being present. We know, so they don't have the resources. They have the opportunity. They are very fortunate that we're still building capacity. At some point, those 4 vehicles they would follow Ikema, and after that, that whole place will be cleared out. So La République has always been kept, like you said, like you mentioned, under a position of being poor and wretched. No major weapons being supplied. When Boko Haram attacked them, I think late last year, they basically just took the entire far north region. Killed a lot of them, and the rest of them escaped. So basically, they're not as powerful. So all of this propaganda that is being done using our people is getting into one ear and coming out on the other. We would follow the strategy that the Ambazonian Governing Council has in place, bit by bit, continue to build capacity and get to the place where we are trying to get to. Thank you.
Thank you. You made another aspect I touched and I picked on was the global weapon shortage. It is very important. It is very important because there is no luxury of obtaining weapons globally anywhere now. So, and that plays into the Ambazonian fighters' benefits. We go for them and we go after their weapons. That's why you see in some areas where our fighters, like in Meme, where they went, they Liberia Cameroon military, they ran away because they didn't have enough ammunition to fight our fighters. So you see, and that's the trickle-down effect of, I can say, the Russia-Ukraine war. That's affecting it's cut right deep into the Ambazonian war because of the global shortage of armament. The disarmament of, or the demilitarization of Europe has also had a positive impact in Ambazonian war, because like you might have the money, but you run short of buying the ammunition that you need because it's not present. That's starting for other operations globally, for order to suit other political agenda and economic agenda by the I call it the Western world. You touched on something also. I just want to bring out those highlights I was finding out. There are some baiters amongst us, people who try to bait us to think that we will dissuade the AGOVC from their mission. When they come and are throwing us challenge, we don't, this is, people, it shows some people's ignorance about what we are fighting for. We don't act according to people's clocks. We act according to the clock of free Ambazonia. So you want to think that they think that this organization is so childish that you tell us that do this, they'll jump on me because we want to prove a point. Who are you? People stand and try to challenge us and dare us. Who are you as a person? Who are you as a person?
Indeed.
And you think we're fighting this war too. You see, this is the problem with when you fight, when you see cloud chasers, you see ignorance manifesting in revolution. It is very catastrophic and dangerous. So they think they'll come and put up the challenge and will run after and start doing something to prove a point. No.
The Ambazonian Governing Council is playing a strategic game. We're not into one tactic today and not worry about what is going to happen long term.
Yeah. You see, that's the stupidity that some people are trying to, the level of ignorance and stupidity that some people are trying to push. It just makes, anyway, I would rightfully say that is one of the plot of the enemy, implanting people amongst us who think that they can derail us for our mission. That mole was sorted out by our national security advisor. They sorted out the mole from within us. And it came out, the mole has come out of the closet and is showing exactly what he is out for. I mean, these are some of the things that you touched on. That is also on our side. That is our land.
It is our land, and they forget that the people that are fighting, they put out this propaganda stuff about the possible Chadian army or whatever army that would come in and help the Cameroon government. They forget that these the ADF, the Ambazonian Defense Forces, all of them are kids that are residing in those neighborhoods. It is their neighborhood. It is their home. They're not going anywhere. You can bring it. You can bring it on. They're there to stay. They'll be waiting for you there, so you can bring on the propaganda. Nothing is going to change. These are when it is not like these forces came from someplace else where they would listen to that propaganda and say to themselves, "We're going to go back to someplace else."
Yeah,
they're home and they're there to stay. They will defend their home until the last
man standing. Yeah, you get it. Where I sense freedom of Ambazonia, there are things that will look deeper. When you see young men who had the opportunity to tap out like cowards, who had businesses going on, some of them were even within the Liberia Cameroon military. When the revolution started, they came to defend their homeland. When you see them marching to the battleground, losing 1, 2, 3 comrades, taking the comrades, bringing them, burying them, the next day they are out to fight. We attended that level, and I just knew that it's game over like Cameroon. Because if you were fair, if you were people who were just like trying to be adventurous, They see their friends being killed. The next day they will take off. The real revolutionaries, they bury them. Pick up their guns, and the next day, that is the foil for them to fight hard. And you've seen how our fighters have fine-tuned themselves. And they are becoming more lethal. You get it? So that is the level at which this revolution is being fought now. We send the best. What we have been selling from day one as AGOC is making sure that the best confronts the enemy, putting our resources together. You see, when General Ivo was around, he used to buy weapons for the ADF. We used to send him money from the AGOC. General Ivo was so strategic. He would buy weapons and he will not give half of those weapons to the already established military. He takes it and opens up fronts for other fighting forces in other areas. He didn't care whether they were calling them ADF or he was calling all the Ambazonia fighters. That's what General Ivo was doing. At times, we'll send General Ivo with $100,000. He will come back with the resources. We'll look at what he's giving to the ADF camps. It will give about 30 or 40,000. He will ask Ivo, where's the rest? They say, I've created other camps. Multiple camps. We say, what if they are Ambazonian fighters? We have the bigger vision of our land. I know some people have been so childish that they think that if a nationalist group goes and carries out an operation, we will be mute. No. The AGOC is a nationalist group. We praise every nationalist effort that is geared towards freeing our land. And it's our sole responsibility to protect all our nationalist fighters and praise them and defend them and protect them. At times you see this stupidity on social media. Oh, it's not ADF, Al-Qaeda. No. People are still in that little mindset. We have evolved.
Right.
We are looking at it from a nationalistic perspective.
If you notice, I've been referring to all of them as the Ambazonian Defense Forces. Yeah.
They didn't know there was a rationale behind coining that terminology. Because we knew that we are one force fighting the enemy. No matter what, if we are the AGOC umbrella or not, we protect all nationalist fighters. And we praise and encourage their actions across our territory. Some people will even take some fighters and keep their honor their wing. When they kill them, they don't even give no respect, nothing about it. They just forget about it. They don't even talk about it. But we, from a nationalist standpoint, will make sure that we'll give him his due respect, give him his due place in the revolution, make sure that he has that covered and move ahead. That's the way we have differentiated ourselves as a nationalist movement from other people that are just going around and trying to milk our people in the name of fighting for our people. So, comrade, I really thank you for really bringing to light these key things and what the enemy has been trying to invest in, trying to break our side. And the unfortunate thing is that some of those people who come and say that, oh, we cannot win, but at the very time they say the Republican cannot defeat us. Then you want us to drop our weapons, stop fighting. After you have proven that they cannot defeat you, then you go and drop your weapons. Is that not cowardice?
Exactly. And I'm still I didn't want to bring this up here because it's something to look into the background. It has to do with, I'm still very skeptical about what happened in Manu, in the state of Manu. The event there, it has so much of the read of what the Red Dragons came out like. It looks like it's a scenario that was set up to happen, so that way it can fit into the narrative of what the narrative of what these propaganda people are out there doing, to connect the dots and tell the story the way that they tell it. So it is something to still be watchful about. I'm not refusing to give credit to where credit is due yet, but it is something that we need to be watchful about.
Okay, those being right, because that instance where the enemy can always sell you and lure you into a particular mindset, but they have a different intention behind it.
Exactly.
That's the point taken. But in as much as that, even the case in that happened out of Academy, but when you see our fighters, the message that we have always been trying to preach from the AGOC ADF standpoint is fight together. Fight together.
Right.
You are more lethal and more useful when you fight together and think you can fight. yeah, fight alone. That is what we've been trying to encourage and praise. Okay, thanks for also bringing that to life for us to always watch or to keep guard of those type of false flag operations. It's very important. Okay, comrade. Now let's see what's been happening in West Africa. I call it the epicenter of African liberation. From the clouds of the French, the bloodsuckers. I always call the French government or the French people, because it is their government. They are leeches to the black race. They are a cancer to the black race. Now you see our defenders in West Africa, the Sahel nations, freeing themselves from the French. Now recently we hear of military bases being kicked out of those regions. What can you say about that? And what is the implication from a global standpoint? Hearing that and seeing the actions of rooting the French, the EU, and the US military forces, their bases in the Sahel region. What context can you put behind that particular action? Not only in the Sahel region, but in Africa and in other parts of the world. Try to put some context around that particular action.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No, I'm giving you a word.
Thank you, Chief. There is a lot that is really happening in both geoeconomics and geopolitics. A lot has happened, and really, like you did alluded to at the beginning of this conversation, and happening very fast. Some of it is driven, or a lot of it is driven by it. It was always going to happen, but a lot of it has been fast forwarded, no doubt, by the war that is happening in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah.
Fast forwarded very fast because the US has gone on to say, take for example, sanction Russia, and very recently the Congress passed a law to take away Russian foreign reserves and freeze them. This was about, I think, in the US was about 300 million, and in the UK, in the European Union was about $600 million, and freeze all of Russian assets.
It's billions, right?
$1 billion, yes.
Billion, yeah.
So what that did was it sent the message across the world that if you're keeping your assets, if you're keeping your foreign reserves in US dollars, which is the basis for trading, the trading currency, basis for exchange between other currencies and other countries. If you're keeping your foreign reserves in those bases, then there is a huge possibility that if you do not agree with the US, then they can just take it away. That is one of, now that this is coming to my mind, I'm going to go back directly to your question, but I need to set the basis for this. That is one of the reasons for which Saudi Arabia still struggles, because Saudi Arabia has sold her oil for time immemorial in US dollars. So what they do is, as they make those sales, they use the US dollars to purchase treasury bills, so that way they can end up and interest. So that they have a lot of their foreign reserves invested in US treasury bills. So what that does is it ties their hand in acting one way or the other, because the US could potentially freeze their assets, and Saudi Arabia, which is one of very wealthy nations, suddenly become unwealthy because the US has frozen all of their assets, foreign reserves. That's what they did to Libya. That's what they've done to Iraq. That's what they did to Afghanistan. They took Afghans' money and froze the two. When
Venezuela also,
and
Zimbabwe.
They did it to Iran. They released a portion of Iran during Barack Obama's administration. They released a portion of it. So all of that is fast forwarding the events that is happening. Now, if we come back to the AES area, which is like l'Association des États du Sahel region, that includes Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. If we come now to that area, what has equally been happening and happening very fast is that Russia has realized that they cannot really function because when the US sanctioned them and tried to push some of those sanctions through the United Nations, a lot of countries, like over 144 of them, refused to vote in favor of those sanctions. You had a few that abstained, and then you had island nations that are like 200,000 people there that voted for the sanctions. But what they've come to realize is that if you also control if you not control, but if you also have influence within these other countries, these regions, then you can also be able to exercise political influence and political capital that can be used in the United Nations for those votes per se. And then Russia has also realized that they had been operating just within Russia, so that it was time for them to stretch their tentacles outside of Russia, so that way they can exercise additional impact or a larger impact, which is what China has done from an economic perspective. So these nations have partnered. When China and Xi Jinping and the Russian President Putin had a meeting at one time, and when they were separating, Xi Jinping getting into his car, he told the Russian president, the next 100 years, you and I are going to make that determination on how things move forward. So basically, Russia provides the strategy, and China provides not strategy, but the military hardware. China brings in the economics, and together they help to build these societies. So if you look at not just the Sahel area, so coming from the Burkina Faso to Mali to Niger, now Russia recently had a military agreement with Sudan, so the Sudanese government, who is you have the other opposition.
The RUF.
Right, that is fighting the Sudanese government.
Okay.
But the Russians now had that agreement with them to set up a military base in the Sudan, and then another military base in Eritrea. And then very recently, the Ethiopian president visited Russia to the conversation. So they are looking for a way that they can exercise influence all the way from the beginning of the Sahel to the end of the Sahel. And so by exercising that military, providing that basis for military control, it empowers these nations to be able to then make their own decisions that are not necessarily pro-West per se. Now, when we started this conversation, I talked about the U.S. Undersecretary that visited La République du Cameroon. The very next stop that they went to was Angola. China has looked to building, so basically, they call it the Lebueda railway track that will go from like Zambia and exit from Angola, or go through the Zimbabwe area and exit from the Pacific Indian Ocean on the other area. So they want to be able to connect this railway. They've been talking about them for a long time. So the US saw that as to be able to extract resources that will be part of China's Belt and Road strategy. So saw that as a huge challenge, especially for Angola that has all this oil, and that has been growing. Basically, Angolan economy has now, they've now been built by the Chinese. The Chinese have gotten in there and built the infrastructure together with in Zambia, so connecting all these economies. Now, going back to the Sahel region, the entire strategy is that when you strengthen these economies and improve their purchasing power and make them much stronger economy, then they will provide additional markets that will be outside of US sanctions, independent of US sanctions. So it also falls within the context of BRICS, where these nations are slowly been, but we're going to get to that, or at least we'll have a conversation around it, where these nations are all slowly moving towards the umbrella of BRICS. China has created what they call the New Development Bank. The New Development Bank is almost like, it wasn't designed to be a counter bank to the IMF and the World Bank, the IBDR, to the World Bank, but it was designed to be an alternative that will provide funding for nations that will want to seek additional funding capital for their investment.
So no interest rates.
at almost like no interest rates.
Yeah.
So these countries have now been given the opportunity for an alternative that they can now go to these other banks without necessarily going to the World Bank, where basically they had conditions where you had to privatize your economy to allow for the neoliberal capitalists to bring in their
The check
capital.
house to come and take all your critical assets and
Exactly.
resources.
Exactly. And then you become like a puppet because then they will threaten you that if you don't do this, we're going to move like what they did to Russia when they sanctioned Russia. Basically, all of the Western investments that were in Russia, they moved them all out. Fortunately, Russia was all prepared for them, and Russia basically just brought in they converted like McDonald's to something that looks like McDonald's, but provided the exact same meal. That's just now in Russia, the economy is booming. You didn't ask this question, but I'm gonna talk about this because just to educate our people on how we can always safeguard against such sanctions. Because what happened to Russia is that Russia used to have all of these oligarchs, they call oligarchs that they call them, that had plenty of money, and the money was all invested in mostly in the West. So when they started putting sanctions on them, they took their money and brought all of that capital back into Russia. And they
Yeah.
didn't know, suddenly Russia finds itself very liquid. They didn't know what to do with all that money. So now they start to use that money to invest in Russia. So Russia now is just growing by leaps and bounds. The Chinese companies have come into it and are investing. And now Russia is seeking to integrate its economy together with the Chinese economy such that they could all continue to grow together by leaps and bounds. So now they
And
provide
they're the fastest growing economy in the entire Europe, even though all the sanctions, the sanctioned country in the world.
exactly, and that has provided the ethos or the impetus for them to have the military backing, the military strength to be able to be present in all these societies. That I mean, right now, if anyone wanted to say have some military strength to be able to go after, say, I mean, not listen anymore to the West, they basically bring in the Russians. The Russians now, just about 3 weeks ago or so, you saw the Russians brought in all this military hardware in the same military
Yeah.
base that had been built by
Yeah.
humans, spending over $112 million to build. And imagine that you build a house in somebody else's country and you see someone else come from somewhere and is taking a part of a part of that house away. So Russia has established itself in that military base in a different part of it. The part that they are in, no, nevertheless, is a part that was previously occupied by the local government. So the local government gave them the go ahead, the Nigerian government to go ahead and do so. Now, to expand on your question, you're seeing a situation where Russia is establishing even diplomatic relations with countries like Sierra Leone that they previously did not have. You're seeing countries now like the North Koreans that are going about having diplomatic conversations that they previously were seemingly isolated because of U.S. sanctions and U.S. Hegemonic. We refer to them sometimes like the empire's hegemonic approaches to doing business. So it is our hope that as the Sahel region, because what they've been doing right now is to try to consolidate their economy, consolidate in terms of bringing it together. Not just only that, um, previously the resources that they had were extracted by the Western companies, and the Western
For free.
companies will for almost for free, and then they set the price. They would be like, we're gonna pay you 11 cents for per kilogram of this mineral that we took from here, and then they go to the world market and then they set the price for which they want because they're all controlling similar resources in every other place that they're located, and set the price for how much they want to sell and then make the margins, make the money for themselves. Now, you have governments like the Burkina Faso asking to set up its own manufacturing or production of its gold right there in Burkina Faso. Uranium being all processed right there in Niger, and Niger will control the sales of its own uranium, which is better quality than any other quality of uranium that you get in the rest of the world. So with those industries not just being only extractive but also being manufacturing, will now help to create not just jobs because it can be sold, expand. So these economies like that, those of the Sahel are growing very fast now. And there was an agreement between Niger and Benin to create, at the time, Benin asked France to build, Niger asked France to build a pipeline from Niger through Benin to the Atlantic Ocean to send in its oil. France refused that it was not possible, it would not be economically beneficial to them. The Chinese came, built the project against the protests of the French, but the French ended up not being able to do anything about it. Today, the pipeline is now all ready, and I think I'm being told that they're now sending in almost like 150,000 barrels per day of oil that is being extracted today. So just imagine how much that could be bringing into the economy of Niger, and how much Niger would pay Benin for using its soil for that transportation, and how that could possibly just grow the economy of this entire region. I mean, we are very optimistic that Africa is going to grow, not just this particular area that is going to grow. The trajectory is going to be more geometric than it has. I mean, the growth has been anemic in the past 62 years, but now it'll be more geometric going forward.
You bring to context when you talk about, there are a couple of things that I picked out. The Russians are coming to provide you with security and arms. The Chinese are coming there with the economic backing.
Infrastructure.
Meanwhile, the West, yes, the Westerners, they don't have anything to provide to you except and bully and threats and conditions for nothing. And then the condescending nature that they talk to Africans, the undermining, the undertone that they talk to us. So technically, you see the empire is slowly collapsing in Africa. You know, the issue on this oil, I think China invested over $400 to $500 million. The Sino-China, I think the Sino-China China company to refine that oil from Niger and move it down through Benin. Look at how things are changing. Just talking about this, you brought something to context I want to talk about. Chad, that was a strong proponent of France. The president went to Russia for military agreement with the Russians. Chad also, recently I hear they have told the American base that was in Chad to get out. Niger didn't only kick out the French base, military base. They have also kicked out the American military base because they're telling them to leave their country. I think I heard recently the Americans are preparing to get out. They have a plan to move out of Niger completely.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And
so when you look at Mali, they have kicked out the EU forces and also the French forces that were stealing their resources. And I think in the last outing you highlighted clearly how they were trying to balkanize and break Mali into two. In our last outing, you made that because they wanted to extract the resources in the northern part of Mali, but they fought together to keep the integrity of the country together. And you make mention of something, because one of the effects that those Sahel nations have suffered a lot in the past is because they have been given them measured weapons from the West. They might have the resource to buy weapons to fight those so-called extremists or jihadis that is now very clear that has been trained and armed by the Western nations to weaken their internal government. They will select the amount of weapon that you said, that this guy was saying that 7 soldiers who are fighting are struggling with one weapon. But now Russia said, I will give you everything that you want. Just name it. And that has given them that ability to be able to push out all those jihadis. Recently, I think from Mali, I don't know if you heard, the Mali Burkina combined forces, they took out the highest, most wanted Al-Qaeda leader.
Right. And the French tried to play down on it and they undermine it, and they did not want to give credit to the fact that the Malians.
Yes. And they were there for all those years. They could have been the Malians and the and the Burkina
Burkina.
Faso, they combined and took out that jihadist and itself.
Right.
And that you get it. So now, from your analysis, you can see now that what has happened in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, they have set a precedence on how to kick out foreign military bases in counties that didn't have a voice. What can you say about that?
And in light of, before I get to that question, just really quick here, there is also, even when the U.S. provided weapons to even its allies, all of them, the only other exception was Israel. They would give you an F-16, an F-35, and then block all operations of that plane. In order for you to use it for an operation, then you would have to call into the US and get an authorization code. The authorization code would then allow that flight to happen if the US approves of the operation or whatever that flight was going to do. So even when they ended up giving to their allies those assets, especially the assets that are deadly, whether it's cruise missiles and the rest, they couldn't use them without authorization or the approval of the United States. So, but Russia comes in and has these conversations and gives you a free hand to do whatever you need to whatever is necessary to protect yourself or to do what you need to do. I mean, you can't sell someone something and still hold on to the key of the car. In order for you to drive that car, you have to ask for the key from me first. So that is how that operated. Now, going back to your question, I'm sorry I missed the line of that question, the last question that you just asked.
Now, I'm asking now that, don't you see that the implication of using your population and your military and your government to kick out foreign military bases from your country? Are you seeing that Niger has set a precedence on doing that across the world?
No, absolutely, absolutely. Because if you look at all Africa, let's go. The population of Africa has grown to about 1.3, 1.4 billion today. And you're not going to continue to hold 1.4 billion people in abject poverty. So, and the people understand who is causing them that mess, who is putting them in that situation, who is causing them to travel the Sahel or go through the Mediterranean and die in the Mediterranean, looking for so-called greener pastures. So what happened in these places, for example, in the case of Niger and Burkina Faso, was the fact of the understanding of these people, of the people of the country, that their enemy was really the presence of the foreign forces that were instigating or not just taking their resources, but putting in place, like the case of Niger, a stooge whose job was there to do the bidding for the empire. So what then happens after the overthrow of these puppets like Bazoum in Niger was the fact that the people came behind the message that was presented by General Chiani in Niger. The message being that these are the people that are causing us all the trouble. We need to get rid of them. So by using them then all of those forces, that when I say the forces of the empire that were present there, then realized that they had because what the forces of the empire always use, they come in, they find people that are willing to support their agenda, and then use them as opposition or use them to do their bidding. So when you have a situation where all of the people are not behind that agenda, they realize that they couldn't find anyone to be on their side in Niger. They couldn't find anyone to be on their side in Burkina Faso. They couldn't find anyone to be on their side. So even when they wanted to get rid of Gaddafi, most of the people that were brought in were forces that were brought in from as far as Afghanistan. They brought in people from Saudi Arabia, people to come and like the ground. They provided the ground forces while they provided the airstrikes on the Gaddafi forces. So these were not even Libyans that that were fighting against Gaddafi. These were people that were brought like the ISIS. They've used them too in Russia now. The people that went to Russia for those terrorist attacks, they call them ISIS-K. So they make up these names, create groups of terrorists, and then then call them terrorists. And then, but they are the ones that are managing them behind the scenes. There was a time when this is aside, but I think that our people should know this. There was a time when the U.S. The CIA was fighting. I mean, like they almost bomb each other, the CIA and the U.S. Marines.
Mm-hmm.
So the CIA was embedded with the ISIS in Syria because they were the ones that were managing the ISIS to fight against the government of al-Assad and calling it an opposition. Meanwhile,
the moderate rebels.
The moderate rebels. Meanwhile, these were all ISIS being trying to remove Assad. But the U.S. Marines did not know that because these are covert operations. So the U.S. Marines were asking for authorization to bomb those forces, and the CIA was very angry, and then sending messages. So otherwise, they kill each other. But that's just to say that sometimes how they use these rogue elements in the name of, in the case of I bring this up too because it's happening in Ambazonia. They come in, they find people that pay them, that are willing to do their bidding, and then they come up and they put out all these messages to try to convince our people. They pay them to convince our people that the Ambazonian Defense Forces are evil. They're doing this, they're doing that. And then you end up as an Ambazonian almost believing that the people that are actually fighting for your freedom, fighting for you are your enemies. So we should be careful with these rogue agents that one day, listen to the message that individuals like this fellow that we mentioned earlier that was talking about. This was a fellow that was running the Ambazonian Defense Forces at one time. So basically, he's speaking against himself that he never accomplished anything. He forgets the fact that some of the operations that were planned, like Operation Sunshine, where we lost over like 13 individuals, he was the one that ran that operation. And now, well, I don't.
Coming to that, there are certain things that probably don't discuss at the background. Now we are evaluating and reassessing some of those operations that this guy's hands was in. Particularly, there was a very heavy operation that was supposed to take place where we assembled our forces, and this mole, I call him a mole that was still within us. This mole, we are still doing investigation because there's high suspicion that he is the one that leaked the operation to the enemy, because we got hit and I lost one of my best elite fighters from Bui that left Bui to join the mother base for those operations. We got hit before we could even execute the operation. So we are still doing some investigation because he was amongst us during that period. Most probably he is one of the ones that is, yes, because it was a very tight operation. But we come to them to understand now his activities and his actions are making us to believe slowly and really believing that some of these leakages that we had in most of our operations, even the escape of this late Mundi, he was deeply involved in it because we don't know how it happened. So this is the damage that this guy went as far as committing or causing amongst us. You get it?
Right.
You just know the idea. People will come and try to discourage the idea of the fact that we are fighting, that we can win with their implanted moles amongst us. I don't still like emphasizing because there's some of the things that we talk about the CIA and the Marines trying having. They are people from the same section but performing different activities. We see that also happening amongst us, and it calls to mind because within the ADF AGOC structure, some of those leakages in very tight-knit operations is being investigated and looked up, and we are looking at what his role was, and realized that before this guy was out there were a couple of key fighters like Captain Small Picking, Tokandu, and the rest that this guy was deeply involved with, even to the moment that they were being killed. So that's the damage that this element has caused But it didn't succeed. It has not succeeded because despite that, the revolution is growing stronger and stronger.
And stronger.
Yeah. So sorry for interrupting.
Oh no, that was a very good point that you make, or that you're making. Absolutely. And to go back to your question on land, so obviously I think that is a good strategy. You have to be united in order for, like what we see in Mali and Niger, in order to be able to fight these very powerful forces. Sometimes they come in through non-governmental organizations. These non-governmental organizations, their primary objective is to use funds. Let's take the case of Agobala, for example. I'm not saying that I don't have evidence that that's what has been done, but I'm very convinced, given the practices that these countries do in other places, they come in through these non-governmental organizations, and that we are supporting freedom and democracy. They come on with all these fancy names, and when we listen to those fancy names, you think that yes, it's truly they sponsor freedom and democracy, and they sponsor this and that. So through those, they give funds, like they fund these kinds of organizations, like the Agobala's non-profit. Let's find out, where does Agobala get his funding from? I mean, so if you dig down deep, you can trace the funding and connect the dots. And then when they do that, people like him then go out and make these statements and act in a certain way, to fit the agenda of the people that are pushing those agendas. So those are the kinds of things that we need to be watchful about. But in these environments like Mali and Niger, I think that set the precedence, indeed, for how you can together unite and push out the hegemon and the empire.
And you're right. Now they have, with the available weapons and that they have the capability. I mean, limitless. They have the capability to fight the enemy effectively now. Then secondly, what I see is that probably you see them, the effect of what Niger has done. The other countries that they have occupational forces in those countries, they can start agitating to kick out the hegemon forces in those countries. I already hear Malema agitating that they don't know why they're US based in Namibia. They don't know why it's there. And one big question I have to ask ourselves as Africans is that, where do you have an African military base in any part of Africa? None. There is no African military base in any part of the world, except within their own country. So why should people be implanting military bases in Africa? And what is the agenda? What is the purpose? How does this serve us? Except chaos. We don't have any military base, any African country. No, there's no African country that has a military base out of Africa. So why do people feel so comfortable that they will come and plant military bases in Africa? That's the question we have to be asking our own selves. And those are tools, and those are inlets for chaos. When you see those countries insisting and saying that you people have to leave our country, we don't need your presence here, there's a deeper reason behind. Look at what the French and the EU forces were doing in Mali, northern Mali, exploiting and extracting their resources, empowering the Tuareg, giving them weapons to fight and claim that they want to be independent so they can come and control resources in the upper Sahel region, in the upper Mali region. That was the plan.
Yeah, right.
Okay. And if you look at it, across that belt, now Chad is joining in. Eritrea is already with Russia. Chad is joining in for community agreement with Russia. There's also, across the whole of that belt, Sudan also now, the government of Sudan is also talking to Russia on arms support, support. China is around those areas, helping them with economic empowerment. No strings attached to control internal politics. So you begin to see how, and then the worst thing is that the Western nations, if you can only talk and condemn, if you don't have anything to provide to them, then you are not relevant to them. You're relevant to Africans. Because if you are countering what you are talking with, if you are countering, you are showing something better, then they can listen to you. But you don't have anything to show. You're only condemning the other people. and you don't have anything to show. So you now see even the other countries, the other parts of the world, like in the Far East, their bases, they are also here, like in Japan. The Japanese are agitating that the military base in Japan should leave. I already hear people questioning the American military base in Germany. So you see that, and when they turn and see what Niger has done, they look at what Mali has done, taking out the foreign military base, using every tool available. It sets a precedent that it might affect the entire military installations of foreign military installations in the entire world, applying in Africa also. Because the Ghanaians, I've started hearing them talking about asking the question, why is the American military base in their country, that they don't even have access to part of those areas in their own country? Because now there's the discussion of trying to the military base that are kicked out of the Sahel, they are trying to house it. I hear discussions were going on that they were talking with Nigeria to bring it there. And I think Nigerian activists and part of their government, they are already raising red flag that it's never going to happen in their country. No French, no foreign military presence in their country. They don't want it.
Right.
The other people that we are looking at, I don't know.
Ivory Coast.
Yes, Ivory Coast, Benin, and Ghana. There's a possibility that what has happened in Niger, people will start talking in those countries to stamp out in the installation of foreign military bases in their country. And
and that's part of what happened where they went to La République to try to see whether they can have a conversation around trans. Because I think that they were not planning to bring those Nigerian people that are at the Agadez military base there in Niger, to bring them back to the US. It looks like they're looking to find another place to move them there. So Cameroon was potentially an objective. Yes.
But yeah, will probably do Cameroon accept? We'll find out. Maybe they'll come out and tell that, okay, we're going to admit you back to Agoa if you push our military forces there. We'll never know what concession they're going to play around. But the point is that it is a little bit tricky because the French also are scared that if they bring those forces there, they might airborne them out of Cameroon. Because now it comes back to the point of interest. Because it's likely that the Americans install, because even when the Niger issue, you realize that when they were kicking out the French, Americans were silent because they thought, from my own thinking, that they were going to be the ones to settle there. But the Nigerians started saying, no, you two out.
Right.
That's only when they started calling Nigeria that they don't recognize the government. You see, so all is built on interest.
Absolutely.
Everybody is trying to figure out what is good for him. And when you talk about the whole of that West Africa, there's a struggle and a fight for control of that whole Sahel. I mean, the whole that Gulf of Guinea.
Right.
The northern part of Africa is, in the hands of the Arabs, is a bit closed. But the southern, the west coast of Africa, I see there's a struggle for a presence, a foreign presence in those countries. Either US or France is trying to cover the entire west coast of Africa. But now, when you see what Niger has done, pushing out all the bases, don't want new people, and technically other African countries in the western part of Africa take that stance, that's when you can start thinking that you can think for yourself and do for yourself. You get it? Yeah. So it is going to, the ripple effect of what Mali, Niger in particular has done, kicking out those military bases, is not only going to end there. It's something that might affect the hegemon globally. Because people can start looking at it and say, this is a template on how to send them out in our countries. And they'll start applying that. That is the ripple effect that people might be looking at in the mid to long term. So let's wait and see how the entire world reacts to that particular action.
Yeah, and we're going to get to this at some point in this conversation, but it connects with what you're just saying, that given what has, there was a period which was generally referred to as the unipolar moment, which is right from like the 1945, where Europe was just emerging from the Second World War. The entire place had been destroyed, so there was no strong contestant. The only other country too that was economically weak, even though militarily strong, was Russia.
Yeah.
So essentially, the U.S. had a time when basically they were the only Godzilla standing. So that was the unipolar moment. They made the rules. They pushed everybody to do what they wanted to do. Asia, if you look at like China, Japan, Korea, they too had just emerged from wars. The Korean War had just been fought, which was very devastating. There are comments that were made even by U.S. pilots that they were flying over North Korea and couldn't even find any other place to bomb because they bombed down every place. Everything. So basically, the U.S. was the only Godzilla standing. That was a unipolar moment. Now you have countries. It is not like the U.S. has really declined. It's that technology has really significantly improved and very become cheap. That you can now make a missile like what the Houthis or like Al Qassam over in Yemen are doing. Use $15,000 missiles to shoot down $3-4 million missiles. So, and because technology has improved significantly and countries have become much stronger, you have a situation now where I think it's the Shanghai Cooperation, where you have China, Russia, and then Iran is a part of it too. And there's one other country because there are four of them that have formed sort of like a military. It's not a military pact per se, but it's kind of like an understanding where it's like you attack any one of us, we will provide support to the next one. We're not going to send our military there per se, but we will find any other strategy to help the other person, including the fact that we can supply the other person with weapons to help themselves. So you're having those structures now being altered, strengthened to the way that is given a lot of other people their standing to be able to make their case or at least to assert their independence from the empire.
Yeah, you hear now Iran has also gone to Niger. Iran has opened diplomatic ties with Niger. You know, and the mindset behind the West is that they might be probably plotting to gain uranium, complete their nuclear process, their nuclear program. North Korea also, now with all this happening within a very short space of time, 3 years span, North Korea is also establishing ties with Burkina, opening an embassy in Burkina Faso. Yeah, people, I mean, they count that they were tied. And you realize that all these things happened also during the special military operation era. Before then, I think Russia visited Nigeria, Ethiopia, I think in Egypt. One of those countries, it is not Egypt, there are 3 countries that Russia visited, that the Russian delegation visited in Africa. And you were not hearing about that before that, you know, and established economic, military cooperation with those countries. And that visit between Nigeria and Russia paid in Nigeria, that even triggered, because now it triggered now the West to provide weapons to Nigeria, because Nigeria had been asking for weapons to fight Boko Haram. But they were armstringing them. And when Russia visited in Nigeria, I think it made the West to run fast and maybe uplift, you know, releasing about weapons worth about $800 million to $1 billion to Nigeria to fight the Boko Haram. You know, so that's how things started changing geopolitically across Africa. North Korea, that was isolated and has not been isolated. Now they are bringing their around the world. They are functioning as a normal functional state. And then I know we've touched a little bit on Africa. Let's touch on when you look at the Russia-Ukraine war, what has been the consequence to the global South? By global South, I mean Africa, Latin America, and other developing countries. How has this war impacted or changed the dynamics in this country and their interaction and relation with the world? That's why I call it global South. Yeah, can you emphasize? Can you break down that piece between this war in particular, Russia-Ukraine war? How has it changed dynamics in global South and global South interaction with the entire world?
Right. You know, we started talking about BRICS for a lot. I mean, BRICS has been around for a very long time, but nobody took them seriously. And they were like, well, at some point they're gonna dissolve. They have nothing to offer. Blah blah blah. So what this war between Ukraine and Russia has shown is that the war was by itself was not just a war between Ukraine and Russia. It all happened, first of all, where the US was trying to encroach using Ukraine like a stepping ground towards getting to Russia. They had Russia all sanctioned with the hope that Russia was going to be able to collapse and then break down Russia. Russia would be weak, and that would give them that would become the impetus for them to then move to destabilizing China or having an outright war with China. And as a consequence, then will then remain the empire, remain the single standing Godzilla, like I mentioned earlier. Now, what that has done is, as they've been funneling all these weapons from all the Western countries, and including countries that are referring to themselves as Western countries like Australia and New Zealand, and Japan and South Korea, funneling all this support to Ukraine, and Russia still be able to squash them and moving. I mean, right now they're moving at lightning speed with the way that they're taking territories, taking villages in Ukraine, Western Ukraine. So what that has indicated to a lot of other countries is that Russia is strong enough militarily to defeat NATO, defeat the West as a whole and its totality, without even using. And it is said that Russia has not even used up to 10% of its military capacity.
It is still they're still calling it special military operations.
So it's not even
long war.
Right. Right. So that tells you just how strong the Russians are. If you look at the Chechnya forces, they've been on standby now for a long time because Russia was trying to guide against the potential of NATO forces actually coming in. So there are many forces, Russian forces, that have not even been engaged yet, that are just on standby, just in case they are needed. So what that has shown to the South countries of the South is the fact that Russia is here to stay. They are a military power to be reckoned with, and together with the Chinese economy and military might, then we can look into a potential where we can align ourselves with either BRICS or the East, including Russia, China, and the rest, and India, and be able to still be able to grow our economy, to be able to provide for our people. So it is. You see a lot of countries now even including like countries like Venezuela. I think the Venezuela president is currently in China as we speak. Yes, that have all come to the conclusion that in order for us to remain standing, we have to be able to use countries like Russia and China as the backbone for our economy, strengthen our economy, and look at like Argentina that decided not to join BRICS. Their president has recently passed some rules or laws that has created for devaluation of their currency. Inflation now is running wild. So the country is basically economically crumbling. So what Russia-Ukraine war has shown too is that in order for you to stand against the empire, you can align yourself with. I mean, there are options that are provided by countries of the BRICS, countries of like China and Russia, then that will help you grow. So I think overall, what we've noticed too is that Russia has started to assert itself like a force to reckon with, by helping a lot of the countries, especially in Africa, stand on themselves. They have recently, I mean, like in the last 3 years, introduced courses like Swahili that is being taught. So that tells you that they're looking strategically how they would connect their economy long term to Africa. So, but what Russia too has been doing is asserting itself as a power to be reckoned with in Africa, coming to all these other countries in opposition to countries like France, and giving power to these countries to be able to assert their independence. Now, France has gotten so angry and threatening to send forces to Ukraine in order to fight Russia there. But Russia doesn't care because Russia knows that at this point it can even defeat the West. So overall, I think that going forward, we would have a system where it would not just be a bipolarity, but a multipolarity, where you have China on one side, you have Russia on another side, and then you have the West. Because you can't really count on the European Union now. They're all just, their economies are just falling apart at this time. So you can't count them like a strong force to reckon with. That's why they can now only threaten and threaten. To show you how strong the empire is, when the Chinese president was coming to visit Macron, they brought in this, I think her name is Ursula
Yeah,
von der Leyen, to
on the
also
lane.
be present. And that, most sources are saying that's an American asset.
Yeah.
To make sure that the French president,
to caution Macron not say anything.
Exactly, or don't go into any kind of agreement that will not benefit the West, or at least don't align yourself with the Chinese against the West. Same thing that when I think it's Olaf Scholz was going to Germany, was going to China, they sent her. I think that was still Macron. So maybe they don't trust Macron then, because they have to have someone always stand by him to kind of make sure that he doesn't.
For sure. You know, Macron flip flops a lot. In the same China, I think when Ursula went there, and Ursula had to leave on ceremonial, they had to make sure that they made her visit her stay in China very uncomfortable. She had to leave, and that was when Macron said, he was saying what to the Europeans, that we should not keep on following America, just following what America is saying, because it's detrimental to us. You get it? So from what you're saying, Ursula von der Leyen has always been close to Macron, and you were like, what are you doing in, you are EU commissioner or head of EU, whatever. But what are you doing in China? China is visiting Macron, visiting France. Why should you be there and close to Macron, exactly, and tailing him around the place? You're right. It's an asset. It's an asset. He's strategically being kept there for that purposes, because Macron can just get up and then say what he has to say. Next time you hear, they will send the hegemon will send him warning that you have to retract back that statement. Then the next day you hear Macron say something else again. Exactly. So it's been going on. When I take a look at what is currently happening, as I just brought this question up to you. First of all, the Ukraine war, the way I see it, has been the death of the Western hegemon. That's the graveyard of it, because the only weapon the biggest weapon that the West had was the economic sanction, the SWIFT financial system. So what has happened now is that Russia has shown the world how to circumvent Western sanctions. They were unblocked from the SWIFT financial system, but Russia circumvented that whole thing and established an alternative to trade with China and other BRIC nations, always the SWIFT financial system. And within a month or two, the ruble was from 70, went down to 140 something, and within a month it came back. Like it went right about something per dollar.
Right.
So they have demonstrated that. Now that's why you see a lot of countries in this global south asserting themselves. Because now it didn't only happen like that. I think China was also giving a back wedge for them to be able to sell and even do intertrade with their currencies.
Right.
Now, and immediately after the Ukraine war, when the Ukraine war started, after that, Russia successfully circumvented those sanctions. Now you started hearing other countries, even to Ruto, the flip-flopper also started telling African countries, don't depend on trading all of dollars. Start trading your own internal currencies. Don't depend on dollars. They could have that voice to start speaking. Even now, China is selling oil with Saudi Arabia. They're trading in yuan, Chinese yuan. They're doing trade in that. I think also UAE is also trading in their own currency, not necessarily using the dollar as the traditional the legal tender. So a lot of that is happening within the BRICS nations. They are now trading with their own local currencies. Now, and circumventing first of all, circumventing the sanctions. Which was the biggest weapon.
Right.
It cut off a chunk of the Western arm in sanctioning countries. Secondly, not trading in dollars is also weakening the hegemon, because now you can trade in other currency. The dollar only had its strength because they were using it as a global legal tender. And if Russia could successfully circumvent it, other countries now are copying and understanding they can circumvent. You made a point during the beginning of this conversation about seizing of assets and the implications, the repercussions of seizing frozen Russian assets. There's a greater repercussion in the West because people now will find it riskier investing in the West, other investors, because of that. I'd rather take their money and invest in an account they feel that is safe and secure for them. That's the risk. And all of this is happening because of the Ukraine war.
Right.
The global South countries, they have other partners, other options. They're no more scared of sanctions. That's why you hear a country like Niger can flex his muscle and tell America to get out of his country. That's why America, knowing that they have assets in Zimbabwe, that they rely a lot on lithium, that's the next generation of energy in the world. They have to figure out how to release Zimbabwe and see how they can get a cut of that pie also for lithium, because China is lithium, and I think lithium and cobalt. They are the next tool for energy. Like electrical cars and the rest. So they release them from that chokehold. I don't know that their money that froze about $3 billion in the UK. I don't know that they've released their money also. They are really from that financial chokehold because they have an interest in it.
And one other thing that China did was China used to have about $1.3 trillion invested in US treasury bills. So as those treasury bills mature, China did not renew them or buy them. So instead, they preferred to use their excess, because they've been having like a trade surplus with many countries. So they prefer to use all of those surpluses, those funds, and invest them in infrastructure in other countries. So by building, China would come to this country, for example, have an agreement, would help you build this bridge from this place to this place. You pay off over 20 years, and they can agree even on the interest that you pay on, rather than put your money where it will be seized at some point when they sanction you and don't like you. Put it at a place where a government has agreed that this is, you invest here, we pay you this amount over 20 years. So that is some of the strategy that China has done, investing infrastructure, not just only in Africa, but in the Caribbean, even in South America.
Even in Europe.
Yes, in
China
Europe.
is investing in infrastructure in Europe. Seriously, I was surprised.
They have integrated a lot of construction work in Serbia. I was actually surprised to hear that Serbia and even Hungary. That's why Hungary has been
even Italy.
Right.
Yeah, that's why you even see him visiting, because I think I'm foreseeing that Hungary and Serbia might be the first two European nations that they will be invited into the BRICS. I'm foreseeing that there's a likelihood that those two countries might be integrated into BRICS.
Because they're all part of the Road and Belt and Road Initiative of China. That's part of the path where, there's that possibility. You're right.
Yeah. Z visited them also in his trip to Europe. After France, he visited Serbia also. So it is a lot is changing, because it's not as if they are unshackling. The war in Russia and Ukraine is really unshackling the chains around the global South. I can see some of them asserting that their power, their strength, or talking without fear, doing things without being afraid of the repercussions, because they know that they have options. When this war started, I said something. This will lead to a release. This will relieve the chains that Africa has been shackled with. I told someone about 3-4 years when this war started. He could not understand it. Only when I brought it back round circle and he's now beginning to see what I was saying. Okay, we touched on that aspect and the implications of that war. Let's go back to the very last thing. Let's be ready to wrap it up. I know it's taking a lot of time, almost close to 2 hours. The last thing that is currently happening, because if you are an oppressed person and you cannot openly stand up against oppression any part of the war, and you think you're gonna cut your own pie and stay quiet, then you are someone who will have dignity and integrity, you have the balls. When we look at what is happening between Israel and Palestine, I think on our own platform, our platform here, we are identify ourselves with the oppressed. And we are just out of humanity, keeping politics aside. You can't stand and see people being caged, just as we are being caged in Ambazonia. And you see them being slaughtered, and you don't stand by them. And you think that just isolating yourself and thinking about yourself is going to save you. It's not going to save you. It's not going to help. Just like South Africa has stood by Palestine. It is not just now. They have a historical time. Right in the days of Mandela when he was jailed. Till now, the South Africans are still in the charge. You get it? So when you look at what is happening in Palestine, and this is the last topic that we're going to touch on today, and Israel, what can you say? What do you think is going to be the outcome of this war, and how it's going to impact us globally?
You see, I had someone ask me, why is it that I was so passionate about the Palestinian cause and forgetting that I also have to fight for Ambazonia, or forgetting the Ambazonian cause. I told the person that I haven't forgotten the Ambazonian cause and it's never going anywhere. The Ambazonian cause is still there till independence. But that I equally see a parallel between the Palestinian cause and the Ambazonian cause. A parallel being that you have colonizing forces that come in and colonize your territory. Ambazonia was a Category B territory, just like La Republique was a Category B territory. So La Republique does not have any standing to be given Ambazonian independence. Ambazonia is going to assert its independence whether they like it or not. We're not getting it from La Republique. So no matter what propaganda they go out there to do, it's not going to impact what is on the ground exactly, the outcome. So that I saw a parallel between those two incidents where you have a colonizing force comes in and takes over your country, and at some point the country becomes a trust territory, and the rules of the United Nations ask you to prepare this territory towards independence. And instead of you preparing the territory towards its independence, you then bring in some political shenanigans and scuffle and move the Charter of Independence for that country to another country. Just like if you look at the Palestinians, the Palestinian territory was there before even the existence of Israel, of the Zionist project. Yeah. Palestine has always, if you look at maps from 18th century, it was at some point was referred to as the Philistines. Before towards the early 19th century, it started to be known as Palestine. The British come in, they occupied Palestine, and instead of the Charter of the Independence of the territory of Palestine as you met it, then you instead create a state of Israel, bringing in the spills of your tribal wars from Europe to take someone else's territory, and still not given. I mean, they divided the territory, but they still didn't give the independence of the Palestinian part of the divided by the United Nations part of the territory, grant them their independence. And then they empower the occupying force with weapons and support and
financial
support and all kinds of support that to cause them to go over. I mean, to cause them to take over someone else's territory instead of giving them the independence. Now you see the parallel with La Republique. Instead of giving Ambazonia the Ambazonia independence, they empower La Republique to look for a way to slowly and continuously assimilate a category B territory that should be independent by its own rights and by its own merits. A territory that predated even the Germans that exist. So when I see that parallel, and then the use of tactics that that is being used in Israel to subjugate the Palestinians. If you see at the beginning of when we started protesting, these guys, they had the helicopter gunship that just shot people indiscriminately. They went out, they did hand cutting. At some point, they were burning people's houses indiscriminately and killing people, even all the way in hospitals. Those are the kind of tactics where the Palestinians go through. I'm not saying that at this point we'll compare the level of the cruelty.
The cruelty. You're right.
Exactly. So when I see that parallel and also the moral obligation for why we fight and why the Palestinians also are objecting to their colonization, you see, you take someone, you lock them up in almost like a concentration camp for 15 years, and then you expect that there should be no opposition. You ask about the outcome of the Palestinian struggle. One of the objectives of the Israelis is to eliminate Hamas. How do you eliminate a force that is there to object against what you're doing to them? Because let's say if I identify as a Hamas member and you kill me, basically if you maintain the status quo, there will be other people that will still protest against the same things that you're doing to them. There would always be the people that would fight for their freedom, so long as they are kept under chains, so long as you keep them under bondage, so long as you keep them under subjugation, there would always be a Hamas. So that the only way that you can eliminate Hamas will be a situation where you free the Palestinians. Now, coming back to the Ambazonia structure, so long as Cameroon continues to maintain its occupation of forces in the state of Ambazonia, so long as it continues to look for ways to annex and assimilate the Ambazonians, there will always be opposition to that. The Ambazonian population now is roughly, say, 7-8 million individuals. By 2050, it's been estimated that there'll be over 15 million of them. How do you think that you'll be able to subjugate 15 million people? So that's not going to happen. There will be bloodshed, whether there is in proportions or in parallels like you've never seen, like you've not yet experienced. And this would be the better time for you to structure your economy, knowing that you are doing so within the boundaries and independence of your country. So no matter how much you try to include Ambazonia in that mix, it's just not going to happen now. It's not going to happen in the future. It's not going to happen in 100 years from now. So to save the blood of the people that are going to die in future because of your quest towards assimilating Ambazonia into your territory, now would be a better time for you to pick up the pieces of your colonial forces and walk away. So the way that I see the resolution of the Palestinian problem, any Palestinian watching this should bear with me. We understand that, or bear with us. We understand that the level of cruelty that you guys have been subjugated to is beyond anything any populations of humanity has endured. But I see it as right now the Netanyahu government is talking about going into Rafah. Prior to the population of the northern part of Israel being moved to Rafah, the population there was about let's say 800,000. Now you moved in 1.2 million other people. So everybody is now choked up in a very small space of land. How they end up with this, it's beyond my understanding. So there would be like a lot of cruelty to lots of people that are going to die. However, I don't think that Hezbollah, that is located in the north, will sit and watch Rafah and the Palestinian people being decimated. There was a time when Nasrallah, who
Mhm.
is leader of Hezbollah, made a speech, and he indicated in that speech that they are waiting for the time that they receive the right signal that Hamas is about to be decimated. Then, because right now Hamas had told them to hold off to doing anything, so all that Hezbollah did was created a second front in northern Israel to make it very difficult for Israel to distract them. And then every now and then there are little skirmishes. But Nasrallah is waiting for a time when they will receive a signal that Hamas is is in a very difficult situation. That is when, and Hezbollah has over 100, it is said that Hezbollah has over 150,000 precision weapons.
Yeah.
At that time, northern Israel all the way to Galilee would probably be decimated. So I think that going into Rafah will be very devastating for Israel, because right now they are losing from a strategic perspective. They've become a pariah state. Everybody right now, if you watch, there was a video where I think it's called where it was a music festival somewhere in Europe being organized, where one of the Israeli singers was trying to sing and everybody just started booing them.
Mhm.
So that is just to show you just a situation where you've created where not just the Israeli state is hated, but everybody now despise anything that is coming from Israel. Uh,
Yeah.
they're losing the strategic battle. Previously, every major news agency will stand out and talk about the fact that the Israeli Defense Forces have said this, and people will believe it. But today, nobody believes them. Nobody, no matter what they say. Um, They've been talking about shredding the United Nations Constitution, and even with that, the U.S. government has threatened. BRICS is coming up. A lot of nations are joining. So even you can see that even in the near future, that you can have enough states in the BRICS to the extent that they become their own United Nations, and
Sure.
the crap in New York just becomes
Sure.
empty. Nobody
Yeah.
attends that. So I hope that I answered. I blab about a little bit, but
Yeah, because you hit a couple of you hit a really some really good points because um you drew the parallel between what we are going through and what Hamas. I mean, it is clear. Yeah, on the level of cruelty, it might be different because of the overwhelming firepower that Israel has, and the largesse that they enjoy receiving weapons at will from the West. That's the first thing. And but from an ideological standpoint, what is happening to us is exactly what the Palestinians are also facing. And being humans, it's not just like politics, it's not politics, humans. You cannot see what is happening except that you have lost touch of your humanity.
right,
See, yes, what is going on, not from a political, but a human perspective.
right,
You don't raise your voice and say, this is not right.
right.
The
Absolutely,
moment you human globally can stay quiet, then we have lost our humanity. No amount of bullying or threat will make this go away. People are going to consistently, and the longer it takes, what they are doing, I think the more the world will delegitimize the state of Israel, the current state of Israel. And mind you, I hear hundreds of thousands of Israelis living in the northern part of Israel has left the country. They
right,
don't have a working population because they have to come to Malawi, take people there to go and do their farming. So a lot of the whole of the northern Israel has been evacuated because of the capability of Hamas, of Hezbollah.
Hezbollah,
They have the capability to strike the other end of Israel. This is a small country. I went to Israel. I went to Israel for some time to work. It's not a big country. You can travel across the country within maybe 2 hours. If you have a fast car, you can run across the country,
right,
maybe not from east to west. So they have the military capability and the weapons to aim at any part of Israel. Hamas has that. I mean, Hezbollah has that capability. And they have not even shown all their capability, because I think Israel is still surprised at the level of capability and precision that Hamas has in doing what they are doing. Even though with all that embargo, they are still having weapons in Hamas territory. That territory, they still have weapons to fight the Israelis. And they don't even know what Hezbollah has. So I think, I'm thinking that the very best thing for the Israelis to do is to keep ego aside. They are fighting against an ego tree because they have lost globally. Even their backers, they cannot stand and confront the entire world. It's a shame that you go to the UN, all the major countries are seeing evil and are condemning them. One other major country is saying that it's okay. Where is our humanity?
Exactly.
You get it? In the long run, let me give you this scenario. Let's say you blow off Rafah. How are you going to live in that type of a state? How will you live as a people that perpetrated genocide in front of other people, in front of the whole world? You know, the good thing about it is that one of the biggest opposition to this Zionist project are Jews living out of Israel.
Right. Absolutely.
Yes. Absolutely. And that's what even gives me some peace, because I think that they're doing it for two purposes. First, from a humanity standpoint. Secondly, maybe the religious standpoint. Here they said from their Torah that they were never supposed to create a state.
Yeah.
They're using the Zionist project. They're using their faith, the Jewish faith, to cause chaos, and they are saying that's not part of us. Mm-hmm. The aspect is that the fourth one I'll put through in is that they are also, the Jews out of Israel, are also saving themselves, because if they stay quiet, they become a global pariah.
Right.
So they have to do what they're doing to let the world know that, hey, this doesn't represent Jew. This is Zionism. And there should be. So what they've experienced in the past years is that they were trying to tie Zionism to Judaism. So now with the current happening, what's happening? Practicing Jews are trying to separate themselves from Zionism. Because if you go into the Zionist project, about 1/3 of them are atheists. Those Zionists are still in Israel. About 1/3 of them are atheists.
I mean, maybe even all of them.
Yeah. So if you look at it very well, so those that are out, that's the goal. That's the only thing that, and I see at the end of the day, for them to save face, is just let the two states you will have to see some of those lands that is seized. Make concessions on how the Palestinians to live. Give them their own portion, a good chunk of the land, the one that you have seized and occupied. They'll have to resist, give up some of that land, and allow the two states to function and thrive peacefully. If not, what they are doing to the Palestinians, I see them indirectly. It's going to be, it will end up happening like chickens coming home to roost, because this is self-destruction of a state. They are self-destroying. And the only way to save what is left of their Zionist state is to cede off part of that land and give it back. Maybe stand up with the 1973, borders that they had in the Camp David Accord. Give that portion of the land to the Palestinians. Give them access to the ocean and one piece of land, take another portion. They can live in peace. Whatever they are doing, that's the only way out. Because on a global scale, nobody who want to trick them. And as African and other countries assert themselves globally, it might come a point where the entire world will shut their doors from them.
Yeah, look at what is happening at the universities right now, comrade. These are a lot of administration people come from these colleges like the Columbia universities and the University of New York, and they go on to participate in government. Now look at the people with the kind of mentality that is exist. They're afraid of. That's why they worry about these kids, because
Yep.
they know that they're not gonna get the support of the old guard
Yes.
once the old guard is gone.
Yeah.
The mentality of these young people that are out there protesting today are going to redefine the shape of the new world order that
Yes.
everybody else wants to live in. And they will not be getting that kind of support. Now, unfortunately, the Zionist project is such that they believing in their Bible, in their Torah, leads them to think that their land has to extend all the way into Iraq, a portion of Syria, a portion of
Yep.
Jordan, and all of that. And then they're going to destroy the Al Aqsa Mosque and then rebuild the temple. And then only then that will be the second coming of the Messiah. So that is the whole religious thought to it. But there is also an economic thought to it. The fact that last 2 years ago, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, Israel tried to steal Lebanon's gas by claiming that it is all in its territory. They invited a European company that came there and was trying to establish, and they were already taking over because Gaza has about 1.5, let's say, trillion cubic feet of natural gas. So Hezbollah told them that if they built any rig on their territory, they were always going to blow it up. So, and when the war in Ukraine, Russia happened, and Russia was sanctioned, the whole theory was that they'll come back and reinvigorate that whole project, where they would then extract, because I mean, that's just where the Mediterranean is, extract that liquefied natural gas and then take it and sell it into Europe.
Okay.
Yeah, so and ship into Europe. So part of the strategy now is to see the US is now building a pier, which is almost like a platform to anchor ships and boats. So the thought is that perhaps they want to go into Rafah and bomb them to the extent that they will not want to live there, and then the US would come as the salvation and then move the remainder of the population, give them to different countries, and then claim that whole area to the extent that they would then take over. I mean, just look at how dirty people, just how egoistic people think, so that they would then take that natural gas and be able to bring in these companies that would, I mean, they're already investors that are looking to building all those hotels that would be by the
already saying real estate along a land that people are living in.
So,
they're living on. They already trying to sell real estate property on people's land.
And then another exactly. Then just look at how nasty, full of no moral rectitude these people, no moral compass these people have, and then take away this, basically cleanse them of their land. And then there is also a political aspect to it, which is more like Netanyahu. By the time that this war, before October 7 was so unpopular, you had over 400,000 people on the streets in Tel Aviv on strike, on protest every day before October 7. So the guy was so unpopular. So part of him keeping this war, like Netanyahu in this case, like when he went and bombed the Iranian embassy in Syria, was also part of him trying to expand the war, so that way he could bring the Iranians would react, then the US would come to their salvation, and then it would have like another 20-year war, and then regional war, then that would keep him in power, because even before October 7, the Israelis wanted him out. They were out on protest because he was trying to. So he had committed all these corruption crimes in Israel, and was trying to change the laws to make the Knesset more powerful, because he has control over the Knesset, his party, and together with those his extremist supporters, that they would be the ones then that would determine some of the rules in which the corruption ends up happening. So he was trying to take powers from the Supreme Court and assign it to the Knesset, where he has control in the Knesset. So they were protesting against that whole machination of him taking over the powers of the courts. So by keeping this war going, then he stays in power because he knows that as soon as the war is over, then
He might be in jail time.
Yeah, out of office, then jail time for him. So there's a lot of angles to this, but the way that you made a suggestion, it's just unfortunate that is from a moral perspective, that is just how it should have been. I mean, divided territories. Most of the people that are coming into Israel now, that were coming into Israel, were mostly like people that have failed and claim that they're Jewish in New York, in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So why not keep those people out, and then the land that you're taking from the Palestinians that have always been there, and then give them back their land and create a separate state? So that looks like the moral thing that should have been done. But because they have this whole agenda of taking away all of Palestinian land and sending them into the Sinai, or I'm not sure what they do with 3.5 million people in the West Bank, and then in Gaza, about 2.2 million, and then plus the ones that are in Jordan that they haven't, that they're not even counting them.
Counted. In Syria also.
In Syria, Lebanon, Iran. I mean, they're all Palestinians are now like really scattered all over the world.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
And with that, it will become very difficult. This is an ideology. Even if Hamas is an ideology, you cannot kill that an ideology. Hamas is an ideology in that land. You can't kill it. Right. It's just like those who are fighting now, their parents fought.
Right, exactly.
You also see, and they are in their own land fighting.
Right.
And people are encroaching their land. That's the same thing happening in Afghanistan, the Taliban. Those who ended the war, their parents fought. And then they ended the war in Afghanistan. So the only way from a moral standpoint, from a humanitarian standpoint, is to split the land. And that is the only way out for the state of Israel to even exist. You cannot bomb or kill. And then you have the genocide card that you wave around people's face that they committed genocide on other people. And then you are doing that same thing to other group of people. I think that the world is going to sit quiet. And nobody could question the genocide. Yeah, what happened to the Jews in Germany was bad. Was equally bad. There are other layers to that. What actually happened, but from a humanity standpoint, that was actually bad. But you cannot go through that situation and scenario, then you turn and you replicate that same thing on another group of people. That's where the world is like losing its. The entire world is losing its mind. How comes you have this genocide card, and then you are trying to exact the same pain or worse to another people? It doesn't fly. You get it? So we'll wait and see how the whole thing evolves. But I think that in the long run, humanity will prevail, morality will prevail, and I think that what they are trying to establish is an outpost. The Zionist is an outpost of the United States. So we know that. But I don't think it's going to exist. If they continue in this light, I don't think, from my own perspective, it's going to survive. It's going to survive the Middle East. The only way that something can survive there is to live in coexistence with other people. Right. And, one other person breaks this whole thing down by saying that if you want to look at the whole Zionist project, if you want to look at what is actually happening in Palestine, it boils down to one thing. Besides the fact that they're using it as an outpost to control the Middle East, you still look at it from this perspective that it is not the Arabs that has been a problem to this particular segment of the Jews. It has been the Europeans. They faced the Inquisitions in Europe. They were totally wiped. They were almost wiped out and imposed upon and maltreated in the 11th, 12th, and 13th century by the Europeans. Some were pushed into North Africa, Morocco, Tunisia, because they were scattered because of the torture that they underwent under the Europeans. Some were forced into Christianity because, and they gave them all sorts of names. So their torture has consistently been with the Europeans. And again now, they are still using them to meet up with a particular agenda in the Middle East. Which parts of the world has always accepted them and housed them and kept them? Because there's a heavy population of Jews, this segment of Jews, Ashkenazi, in Lebanon, in before they were even migrating them to Palestine, they were already living there, and they were living happily with the Arabs,
right?
And also in Iran, there's a large majority of the Jewish population there. They were living. I think the Arabs were accommodating to them than even the Europeans.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, but then they take you people and flip you and turn you against the people that have always been accommodating to you. And technically, it's the Europeans that have always abused them or maltreated them, but now they're falling into this, allowing themselves to be used. And technically, I mean, they are now building that hate again on them by supporting the Zionist project in the Middle East.
No.
So we'll wait and see how the whole thing plays out. We monitor it, but as you said, this platform will stand against oppression anywhere in the world. And what is happening to them, we are lending a hand to say it's not human. We can't allow humanity to be. You can't allow us to be robbed out of our humanity, and we stand and see certain things going on, and we say it's okay. It's not okay. That's why we stand with them. Our own situation is similar to theirs, though the barbarism that they have faced is not as ours, and at times we stand in solidarity with them. I will put it at this platform, not necessarily the organizational standpoint. It stands in solidarity with them because the organization has their own standpoint, own position, as far as that issue is concerned. So that's why at times we always stand and talk from that perspective when we are having those discussions as far as they are concerned. Not necessarily our organizational standpoint, but this platform standpoint. Let me get a distinction. Comrade, I know I've taken 2.5, almost 2 hours time.
It's been a pleasure.
We've unpacked a lot, juggled our minds, and opening up Ambazonians. Some of these things that we discuss, other people now go further to research on some of them and try to have context about what is happening globally and try to be informed. If you have an uninformed population, it's easy for them to be manipulated. But if you have an informed population, it's difficult for you to manipulate the population. So you and I will continue to support our people's mentality, letting them know that Ambazonia is not just on its own. There is a world that interconnects with Ambazonia, and we have to keep on informing them and telling them what's happening around the world and put context to what is going on. So we can apply some of those things to what is happening in our own territory and see it from a broader perspective and know how to approach this war of independence. Comrade, let me give you the floor to say the last word, and let's close this chapter and prepare ourselves the next week for the next geopolitical analysis.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity and for your commentary. I would use this opportunity to equally maybe speak to the Cameroonian government and also all of its supporters in terms of those in the international community, including even the French government and all the other international organizations and institutions that are behind La République Cameroon. They need to know that this is what we know, that the Cameroon economy is crumbling, and you cannot fight a war with a crumbled economy. That is one. Secondly, traditionally and historically, they've starved African governments of any ability for them to be able to fight any wars. And even when they've given weapons, those weapons have come with restrictions. We do know that the Cameroon government is weak and its army is disjointed and equally very weak. We equally know that they do not have the capacity to fight in an entire territory of 400,000 square miles. So that is just basically impossible. And this is the Ambazonian land. And for those that they are sending to do all the propaganda work because they can't fight, We tell them that they can do their propaganda work because it's definitely not generally not going to work. We started this fight, or the Ambazonian people started this fight with rubber guns, and then they went, well, maybe first with peace
Peace
plans,
plan.
and then they went with rubber guns, and they went with rocks, and they went with chavums, in this case, den guns and stuff. And then they've moved on to a place where they're able to detonate what they need to detonate in order to take care of business without even being there.
Yep.
There will come a time when they're exploring delivery mechanisms, that they would be able to deliver systems, build systems that would deliver those knockouts, where they don't even need to be there to deliver those knockouts. Those systems will be put in place as well. So you can go around wasting your time and doing all the propaganda and coming up with one failed strategy after another. That's not going to change anything. And that said, in addition to that, the Ambazonian Governing Council's processes and strategy from a long-term perspective is not going to be determined by any stupid income to determining or asking for a challenge. The Ambazonian Governing Council does not operate on challenges from anybody, from any individual, so they can get out there and make any kinds of noise. So that said, it is left for you to pack when you can pack and leave the Ambazonian territory, because the Ambazonian are not going anywhere. Now, part of the strategy of the Ambazonian Governing Council is to tilt the economy, is to shift the economy of Ambazonia towards our Biafra counterpart. And when that happens fully, it will starve La Republique of any economic activity, especially as they used to get 65% of. I'm telling this not as a strategy, but it's what you would observe already happening. So the 65% of the GDP that used to come from Ambazonia will no longer be seen. You probably get 10%, if that. So all of this is to prepare your mind towards the fact that you can get out there and make all the noise, come up with all kinds of machinations to try to convince Ambazonia it is not going to work. The path, we will stay the path, we will stay the course, we will continue to operate as we've operated. We continue to implement the strategy that has been defined by the leader of the Ambazonian Governing Council, in this case, Dr. Ayabacho. And it should be known that without Dr. Ayabacho, that you guys keep criticizing in the morning, he's in your dreams, he's in your nightmares, he's in everything. That even without him, the Ambazonian Governing Council will still stand and operate as the Ambazonian Governing Council. So you can go ahead and call his name 20 million times. It's not going to change the strategy of the Ambazonian Governing Council. In summary of that. So that said, that is for you to put in place the process of exiting Ambazonia. The sooner the better. So, comrade, I want to thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to say these few things, these few words. And it's always a pleasure meeting with you, and hope that we can get together again subsequently and pretty soon.
Thanks very much, comrade. Thank you very much. I think from every indication, we're never meant to be one people. Like Olukaban should get that and should understand that the genie is already out of the bottle. You cannot put it back in. The only way moving forward as brothers is for them to get out of our land. We have a negotiated settlement. Figure out what they have stolen from us and pay us back. We can do business with them as two independent states. That's the only way out. There's just no way out. There's just no way that they should understand. There's just no way for you to evict us from our own land. There's just no way for you to govern us. There's just no way for us to have anything in common anymore. Those are facts. You will not and you will never control us. The time has passed. The only thing they could do to us is use weapons on us, but we have guns. And we are matching them toe to toe. They are running away from their military posts, their outposts. Ambazonia is an ideology of freedom that has come to stay. The only thing for Republic Cameroon is to leave our territory and let's live amicably as neighbors. But there's just no way for them to think that they can still govern us. Their president came out openly and said his mission, his agenda was to assimilate us. And he has failed because it's never going to happen. We were never part of them and will never be part of them. The area that Cameroon gets that. The area their own political structures in place that they have gets that and try to start reshaping their policies to understand that they have to let us go for them to have a functional nation. The area they get that, the better for them. Because as long as they try to hold us, they will self-destruct. Thank you so much, comrade. Really want to really thank you for bringing this level of information. It's very critical. It helps our people to understand that our independence is world dynamics, how the world is not the way we naive perspective must inject the element of strength, finding our destiny. Most comfortable to understand when we understand how the world is, most comfortable to understand our own interests, our independence, we are more patient. Nobody is going to make us our inalienable right to fight and it doesn't depend on calculation. We carry through the next to achieve the objective. I believe that with a proper mind, planning that we have in place, we have the capability to achieve that objective. Therefore, it's not objective. Therefore, we can have the capability to fight us. We can be able to wear down all these internal collaborators and noise and focus our attention on what we are supposed to do right now. Very short time. Much more over so much, comrade, and I look forward to having you on our platform again next week. We'll also try to handle the geopolitical analysis series 4, looking at how things are going and how most specifically we might be targeting looking at American elections coming up. How does it affect Ambazonia? What has been the American stance in Ambazonia? How does their upcoming election affect Ambazonia? We'll go deep into that, analyze that, and make us and let us start positioning ourselves with regards to because a major event that can make or break us. It not really make or break us, it's a major event that can either precipitate our independence or keep us on the same course but heading towards independence. So thank you very much, comrade. And I want to thank our audience and those that are going to watch us subsequently. And I wish them a good night. Thanks so much, comrade, for the good work. And keep on educating our people. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Have a good night.
Thank you.
We house the most unique creatures to ever.
Welcome to ACN.